He stood at the twisted iron gate, his coat collar turned up against the cold wind that cut across the forgotten courtyard. Light from the lanterns outside cast long shadows, shifting over the weathered bricks as if alive. He paused, taking a slow breath of the damp night air. The price he had paid still felt heavy in his hand, a crumpled receipt with faded ink, a testament to the transaction that had brought him here. She waited behind the gate, arms folded around, herself, eyes wide in the dim light. Her hair, dark as raven's wings, fell in tattered waves to her waist. She wore a simple dress of coarse fabric, once white, now stained by time and tear. Each breath she drew puffed faintly in the chill. Fear and hope warred in her gaze. He pressed the receipt into her hand, the words blurred in the low light. United by debt, auction number 47. Winning bid, $35. He had scraped together, every penny he had borrowing and begging to become the highest bidder on a 19-year-old girl sold by her own parents. Tonight, she was his responsibility. He unlocked the gate and it groaned open. She stepped inside, following him past the twisted vines that crawled up the courtyard walls. His boots crunched on pebbles that lay scattered across the ground. He led her to a small carriage waiting at the corner of the courtyard. It belonged to his overseer, an old man named Samuel who had agreed to help him. Samuel stood at the side of the carriage, lantern in hand, his lined face shadowed beneath a battered hat. "Sir, I thought you might need assistance," he said quietly. "Thank you, Sam," he murmured. "Please bring her inside gently." She climbed onto the carriage bench, hesitating as her fingers brushed the polished wood. "It's all right," he reassured her softly. "We're going home." She closed her eyes as Samuel stepped back. The horses moved with a slow grace, their breath steaming in the cold night. The carriage rattled over the cobblestones as they left, the courtyard behind heading east toward the town. Wind sighed between the buildings, carrying with it the faint scent of salt from the distant sea. They passed shuttered shops and darkened windows, traces of life closed against the cold. Soon, the streets narrowed, leading them past a small square where a fountain stood empty. Moonlight glinted off the cracked basin. It was there she spoke. "Why did you do it?" she asked, voice trembling. "Why buy me when no one else dared?" He looked at the road ahead, jaw tight. "Because I saw you there and I couldn't let them take you." "You deserved better than that." She shook her head, tears stirring. "They said you'd make me work, that you'd sell me again, that I'd be owned by you." He swallowed. "I won't sell you. Ever. I can't change how they saw you, but I can protect you now." She stared at him, uncertain. Moonlight revealed fear etched in her skin. Then she nodded once and turned to stare out the window. Outside, the village lights grew closer. A row of ox carts sat empty by a small wooden pier. Fishermen had already gone out to sea before dawn broke. In a modest cottage at the far end of a narrow lane, he lived alone since the death of his wife 2 winters past. They arrived at the cottage just as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. Inside, he lifted her from the carriage and guided her through the door. The cottage smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. A single hearth lay at the center of the room, ashes cold and gray. Samuel appeared behind them, holding a bundle of blankets. "I thought these might come in handy." He accepted the blankets, his eyes flicking to hers. She wrapped them around her shoulders, head bowed. "This is where you'll stay," he said, voice gentle. "It's not much, but it's warm, and it's safe." She looked up at him, voice small. "Safe from what?" He knelt by her side. "From them. From anyone who would treat you as property. From the debt that forced you into that auction." Her eyes filled with tears. "My parents. They were desperate. They said I could help them pay their debts." He sighed. "They lost themselves in fear. They didn't see you as a daughter. They saw you as a means to an end. But I see you as a person with your own future." She stayed silent, turning the blankets tighter. Over the next days, he introduced her to the rhythms of his life. He rose before dawn, visiting the docks to buy fish he could smoke and sell. She followed quietly, learning how to clean the catch, how to salt the wood planks of his smoking kiln. Her hands were small but quick, her eyes absorbing each motion. He watched her from a distance, noting how she flinched at sudden noises, how she started at the crack of splitting wood. Each morning he offered a gentle greeting. "Good day, Rowan," and she learned to respond with a hesitant smile. At the small market stall, he let her arrange the smoked fish for sale. She took to decorating the stall with wildflowers, delicate sprigs of lavender and white blooms from the nearby fields. Customers paused to admire the touch of color. He smiled proudly, and she felt something inside her shift, a spark of self-worth. At night, by the fire's flicker, she cooked for them both. He taught her to bake simple loaves of bread in the hearth's embers. The scent of rising dough filled the cottage, chasing away the damp chill. They broke bread together, sharing silent meals that began to build a fragile bond. He spoke little of his past, but she pieced together fragments. His wife had died in childbirth 2 years ago. He had a son, Isaiah, now living with distant relatives. He had lost his fishing business when a storm shattered his boats. He struggled then, borrowing money to rebuild until one loan became many. Debt seeped into every corner until desperation drove him to the auction block himself to sell whatever he had left. But when he saw her, Rowan, he realized there was more to life than debts. She learned his routine: early to rise, late to bed, every moment devoted to working off his mont. One afternoon, as she swept the crew of his aging kiln, she asked quietly, "Sir, why don't you sell the kiln?" He paused, leaning on his broom. "It's all I have left from my wife. It smells like her, like fresh bread. I can't give it up." She nodded, hesitant. "I'll keep it running if you like." He stared at her, surprised. "Will you?" She shrugged. "I want to help." That evening he taught her the secrets: how to stoke the fire, how to tell when the wood was ready, how to move the racks so smoke passed evenly through the fish. She worked eagerly, her hands growing stronger, her back straighter. With each piece of fish that emerged perfectly smoked, her confidence grew. One morning, a curious traveler appeared at the stall. She was well-dressed, ink pot dangling from her belt, carrying a parchment scroll and quill. "I've come on behalf of Lady Meridian," she announced. "She seeks a commission. 12 dozen smoked trout, salted and blackened at the edges. The payment is generous." He blinked, heart racing. "That's nearly enough to clear my debts." Rowan looked up, eyes bright. "We can do it," she said firmly. "Show me how." He studied her, pride and surprise mixing on his face. "Yes, together." They labored through the day, selecting the finest fish, salting every flank with care, tending the wood fire with reverence. Rowan's hands moved with purpose, remembering each lesson. The traveler watched, nodding approvingly. At dusk, he delivered the fish to Lady Meridian's estate, a grand stone manor perched atop a hill. Guards admitted him to the inner courtyard. Lanterns glowed in the windows. The lady herself watched from a balcony as he presented the barrels. She descended the marble steps, graceful in her silken gown. "I've heard your products are the best in the kingdom. I trust you won't disappoint." He offered a humble bow. "My apprentice and I have done our best." She tasted a piece, eyes closing. "Exquisite. I shall pay you at dawn." He nodded, relief flooding him. As he left, he felt Rowan's hand slip into his. He squeezed it gently. That night they counted the coins by candlelight. Gold and silver clinked in the wooden box, enough to settle his debts, to buy new fishing nets, to repair his small boat. Sweat and tears mingled on their faces as the candle burned low. Rowan looked at him, voice trembling with emotion. "Your freedom is ours." He shook his head. "Your freedom, Rowan. I'm just the one who saw you worth saving." She smiled, and tears slipped free. "Then let me help you save yourself." From that day they worked side by side, fishing at dawn, selling at market, traveling to fulfill commissions. Village folk whispered of their partnership, the widower and the auctioned girl who became a formidable team. They spoke of Rowan's artistic touch with wildflowers and painted signs, of his craftsmanship with barrels and smoke. Together, they rebuilt the business, stronger than before. One afternoon, as they prepared fish by the kiln, Rowan paused, brush in hand. She swirled gentle lines of color across a fish barrel, lilies for hope, vines for resilience. He watched, her heart full. She looked up. "Will you ever tell your son Isaiah about me?" He sighed, eyes distant. "I've blamed myself for so much. My wife's death, losing my boat, nearly selling you. I've never felt worthy to bring anyone into this mess." She set aside her brush. "You deserve forgiveness. You deserve love. Isaiah deserves to know you are healing. And I deserve to be part of your family." He knelt before her. "Would you stay with me? Not as a burden, not as a debt repaid, but as a partner, as my friend?" Her smile broke like dawn. Yes. Seasons turned. The fishing business thrived. They restored his battered boat and named it Mercy, in honor of second chances. In spring, they traveled to the capital, where Lord Meridian himself requested their smoked salmon for a grand feast. Noble guests praised the flavors. The duo's reputation spread beyond,